everybody, and welcome to the Feminine Principle Podcast, Astrology for Authentic Living. My name is Mel with Energetic Principles.
And I'm Shawna with Neo Feminine Astrology.
And in this episode, we will be discussing the astrology for the week of September 11th and what we have titled Clarity, Action, and Devotion. So the purpose of this podcast is to give inspiration and guidance for this week with real-life examples of what to expect.
The three major aspects that we'll talk about today are Venus trine Saturn, which is also sextile Jupiter, which is also trine Uranus. Oh my gosh, get ready for that one, guys. That we are deeming the social butterfly. We also have, on a more serious tone, the Sun in Virgo squaring Saturn, which is about devotion to the vision. And then lastly, we have Mercury conjunct Mars in the sign of Virgo, which is about critical awareness like a boss. So we're really excited to talk about these with you. Please remember, as always, that some of these aspects will influence you more than others based on what is actually happening in your life and your personal birth chart. So we always encourage you to look for potential within yourself and your life and potential within your birth chart. So notice what resonates with you most. Always use your intuition and logic to decide what's best for you.
Yes, because you know you best. So yeah, Shawna, let's kick off this episode with a quick rundown of the moon's path through the zodiac, and some other minor aspects for all you astro geeks out there. Well, we're going to start off the week with our waning lunar lady, who will be moving into the high-spirited sign of Gemini, headed to her last quarter position, which we're going to talk about in much more depth, later in our Venus transit segment. Midweek, which will be Wednesday and Thursday for some, depending on where you are in the world, she's going to move into the sensitive sign of Cancer, where emotions and intuition will be heightened. The weekend's going to bring us the life of the party Leo, where we're going to have our fires ignited. So good times are guaranteed if you can get it. So keep in mind that this weekend is going to have some Leo, fun energy around it. And then we're going to close out the week, in late Sunday, early Monday by reality check Virgo, rolling around. And so we're going to be headed towards that new moon that's going to come its way. Late new moon, right, Shawna? In a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Late in the Virgo cycle. But of course, more on that next week. So yeah.
Yeah, so we are excited. But one last note before we jump into the meat of this week. We're super excited to present a new offering to our patrons. So starting this week, we're offering show notes with all of the details of each episode. So this includes the specific dates and times of each transit with the tarot cards that we pulled and the quotes. So that you can follow along as you're listening and then have these show notes for reference later in the week. And I know for me, that's been super helpful, especially with the tarot cards and looking back and reflecting as the week unfolds. So
Yes.
This will normally be available to patrons on the $5 per month tier. But this week, it will, because it's the first week that we're doing it, it will be complimentary to anyone that goes onto our Facebook page or Instagram. So we're really excited to share that with you guys.
Yes. And speaking of Facebook and Instagram, we actually have our own presence now, right, Shawna? We've separated to as something where you can contact us directly and get these show notes and other fun things that we will share on these pages. So to find that, you can find us on Instagram at Feminine Principle Podcast. And the same on Facebook. It's at Feminine Principle Podcast. So that's where we're going to be sharing these show notes, in a downloadable link. So you can have a PDF download for you to either print out or put on your smartphone or however you want to look at that. So, Shawna, we're so excited to share this finally with, we've been working on this a little while, getting something together for you guys to follow along because, it's a lot to take in sometimes and we need a reminder, midweek. So definitely look for us out there. Once again, that's at Feminine Principle Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. So yeah, Shawna, let's kick into these let's kick into the first segment here, which actually is a perfect reason of why show notes are such an awesome thing. And that's because we have this combo of transits. We've got Venus trine Saturn. We've got Venus sextiling Jupiter and also trining Uranus, in what we have titled the social butterfly. So take a seat and jot these down. Or what you can do is go to our Facebook or Instagram and download all this information. So here it goes. So this is going to be happening in several parts throughout the week. Venus's, party. And so we have Venus trining Saturn, which is going to happen Tuesday, September 12th at 5:49 p.m., which is Wednesday, September 13th at 12:49 a.m. Universal Time. And then 10:49 a.m. Aussie Eastern Time. And that's going to happen at 21 degrees Leo and Sagittarius. Also of note, on that same day, we are having our last quarter square of the moon from Gemini, which will happen on Tuesday, September 12th at 11:25 p.m. Pacific Time, which is Wednesday, September 13th, 6:25 a.m. Universal Time, and 4:25 p.m. Aussie Eastern Time. And that's going to happen at 20 degrees Gemini. So moving on from Tuesday, the next Venus transit we will encounter will be Venus sextiling Jupiter on Friday, September 15th at 12:44 p.m. Pacific Time, which is 7:44 p.m. Universal Time, and Saturday, September 16th, 5:44 a.m. Aussie Eastern Time. And that's going to happen at 24 degrees Leo and Libra. And then last, but certainly not least, we have Venus, who's going to trine Uranus on Sunday, September 17th at 9:25 p.m. Pacific Time, which is Monday, September 18th, 4:25 a.m. Universal Time, and 2:25 p.m. Aussie Eastern Time. And that's going to happen at 27 degrees Leo and Aries. So, whew, Shawna. Did you get all that? So basically bottom line here, Venus is active this week. So Shawna, please kick us in with your quote, for all these Venus transits.
Certainly. So this quote is by the actress and humanitarian Audrey Hepburn. She says, "For beautiful eyes, look for the good in others. For beautiful lips, speak only words of kindness. And for poise, walk with the knowledge that you are never alone." And so let's break this down a little bit. I really love this because this speaks of beauty, which is what Venus is about. Venus is about beauty. It's about aesthetics, and it's also about human connection as well. All of these things that bring us a sense of peace. Kindness brings us peace. Beauty brings us peace. And when we look into someone's eyes, that brings us that connection. What's really interesting with Venus making all of these little contacts is Venus is making contacts specifically with outer planets, with Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus. And these planets, Saturn, Jupiter, and Uranus, they all relate to our connection with something that is greater than ourselves within our society. And so to me, this is a call to connect in a way that is meaningful and in a way that that we have a grander perspective on just our individual life, and that we can evoke change, that we can remember that we're never alone when we stay connected to what it is that we value, and when we kind of like keep the individual connection and then the grander scale of society within our heart at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. Because you're right, Shawna, we're talking about a very personal planet. Venus, making all these outer touchdowns with these planets. So there is this element of personal change within a grander scheme, essentially. And that's what makes this week so important on so many levels, especially if you're Venus people out there. If you are a Taurus rising or a Libra rising, or even a Taurus and a Libra, these are the types of weeks where you're going to see a lot of action probably in areas that are very important to you, such as the ones Shawna was just speaking about. So let's let's figure out how we can like dive down into these, because we have so much going on, right? Like there is so much. So let's pick this apart a little bit so we can paint a bigger picture. So we're going to basically have we're going to have Venus, in Leo trining Saturn in Sagittarius on that Tuesday. And that's going to be the same day that we have our first quarter, moon, last quarter. We're wrapping things up here, at 20 degrees Gemini. So this last quarter moon is going to be forming a sextile and opposition, to this Venus trine Saturn. So basically, with Venus and Saturn, we're trying to stabilize, Saturn's a very stabilizing influence, and we've got a trine here. So we're trying to find harmony. We're trying to find, the growth in the situation and our own self-discipline to basically, help to trigger this flow. So, if you've been finding that you have a little instability around your love life or, your finances, this is actually probably going to be the time where you are going to want to, shape that up a bit or see what it is you can do to put some confines around it or limit your spending or, figure out ways to strengthen a certain area to bring more, abundance in your life, whether that's with, relating to other people or our finances or our own, or getting in touch with our own values and strengthening what that means to us. So that being said, we have this flowing aspect where we're trying to, stabilize these types of things, but we also have that last quarter moon that is shaking some things up within us emotionally, even though it is talking rather nicely to this aspect. So Shawna, how do you see these, that Saturn, Venus, and then that last quarter moon basically coming into play on, Tuesday and the days surrounding?
Yeah, so I like what you say, Mel, because I feel like this piece of the transit is solidifying. It allows for whatever is already concrete to be solidified even more. It allows for strengthening. And the last quarter square of the moon in Gemini, I think, kind of throws in a more interesting piece, because that to me adds another layer of somehow there's a need to work out what it is that is solid and what it is that is not solid. And it's kind of like maybe we're entertaining different things, different possibilities. And I don't know, there may be a possibility that comes in. This energy to me, it feels like, especially with the Gemini moon, it feels like there's something changeable that's happening. And so because it is a flowing aspect, because Venus to Saturn is a trine, it's like we don't have to take advantage of this. It's not something that we're going to necessarily be confronted with, but it's something that we can take advantage of. And so I would really keep my eyes peeled on where we're presented to connect with people who are going to help us do the things that we need to do, or to connect with people who we can really build a solid foundation with, because that's what Venus Saturn is all about. Venus Saturn is representative of those long, solid, committed relationships where we can depend on people. And so that's what I would focus my energy on with this piece.
Yes, definitely some great words of advice, because you're right, Shawna, we're not going to be necessarily confronted with this energy, as far as the Venus and Saturn, trine is concerned, but we will be confronted with this emotional, last quarter moon. But the beauty of it is that the moon is basically tying in rather nicely, or definitely talking with the, with Venus and Saturn. And so something about our own awareness is essentially being challenged right now, so that we can strengthen, these bonds or, find that stability we're looking for, within whatever areas of our life Venus and Saturn are touching right now. So I think that the Gemini moon is going to have us a little excitable, especially on the inside, since we are essentially in this last quarter square where we're confronted with something. But it's more of an internal crisis and an internal thing that we have to work through. And the only thing I would say about, especially with the last quarter in Gemini, is just watch out for any sort of, kind of like knee-jerk reactions to something, because that's one thing that can take a Gemini down a little bit. But I think with all this strengthening, that we're doing with this Venus and Saturn and just this flowing aspect, I think this is actually going to be an emotional turning point, especially as far as relationships and possibly finances, and even your own creative projects and the beauty in life is concerned, where that joy is found. So let's hope that we're having an emotional turning point for a better day and a stronger day.
Well, and I love how the Saturn piece of this comes first, because to me, Saturn is also kind of like a reality check. And it's like, okay, this is working or this is not working. And then after that, we have Jupiter we have Venus making the sextile to Jupiter, which is about opportunities, like you were saying, Mel, opportunities coming in. And then Uranus at the end, which is about breaking free. And so it's kind of like a really neat process that happens throughout the week, where there's a more serious and contemplative and decision-making kind of mode in the beginning. And then there's more space and freedom as we move throughout the week, once we've made these decisions earlier in the week.
Right. Shawna, it makes so much sense, because I know when I was looking at it, it was like reading this book. As you turn the page, the picture unfolds even more. And you're like, wow, this is cool. So basically, you're right, Shawna, because we start off that week basically in that first Saturn trine with a last quarter moon. I don't know why I think it's first, where Mercury still so slow. So that last quarter square in Gemini. And so, our minds are going to be kicked up. Our emotions are going to be wrapped around all these thinking and this processing. And like you said, kind of drilling down and getting real about what it is that we are, strengthening here. And then we basically move into Cancer. The moon moves into Cancer. And so we might kind of, be a little sensitive, a little prickly around what's going on, feeling it all out. And then we get to close out the week essentially with, that Leo moon and that trine to Uranus, where we're ready to basically kick it up a notch and just have fun, and go out and spread our wings and be that social butterfly. So it's like this, it's almost like if you want to use that social butterfly context, we're essentially in that cocoon in the beginning of the week. And then we're going to wriggle our way out slowly but surely, through the Cancer and then see, moon. And then by the time we hit Leo in the weekend, we're going to be fluttering those wings about. So, it's really rather, beautiful process, like you said, Shawna, which is so perfect for Venus, right?
Yeah. And I'm just really struck by how much of a transformation that we're getting, like a shot in the arm around how it is that we relate with other people, how it is that we connect, and maybe even what it is that we value, and money issues. Those are all Venusian kind of things. But yeah, this definitely feels like a pivotal week for relationship stuffs. So I would watch out for that. And that doesn't mean that the relationships themselves need to change. To me, it feels more like an inner revolution, possibly, which, of course, that does affect your relationships. But I would just really be on the watch for what kind of little things come up. Like, what do we notice about ourselves? What are our gut level reactions versus responses, and what's working and what doesn't work, and how to focus our energy best within how it is that we connect with others.
Yes. I agree, Shawna. This is, especially earlier on in the week, this is a time to look within rather than without, to get that insight, that you're going to need around these transits. So, by the time we make it to our Venus sextiling Jupiter, which is on, Friday, I believe. Yes, Friday. we're going to be really feeling the growth and all the work that we've done, essentially up until that point. And there might be a little pangs there around our own growing, because we actually are going to have the moon in the late degrees of Cancer, when we have that sextile with Jupiter. So we're going to have a T-square, essentially between, Jupiter and Uranus. So basically, Venus is making her harmonious aspects of these two planets for the weekend. And then the moon is saying, hold on, we're going to challenge this for a second, just so you can really feel it, and in awaken it in a sense, especially with Uranus. And so, that Venus and Jupiter, hit, to me, is really about finding, we're back to our own heart's true desire in a sense, because this, sextile and Venus is going to be on our North Node at that point. And the North Node, is really all about, helping new and positive growth come into our lives. And perhaps even starting a new chapter of some sort. And especially with Jupiter there, that is basically, all about, going forward and how can we grow. This is really a time where we have to, it's a sextile, so we have to take action. There's an opportunity around being able to follow that heart's desire, whether that's a person or a vocation or an artistic hobby or whatever that means for you. So Shawna, how do you see this Jupiter action in the North Node and like how significant that could be for, really this big picture growth we've been working on?
Yeah. So to me, this really ties it back to the eclipse that we had, the solar eclipse in Leo. And it layers so beautifully because the moon's path is reflecting that we're closing out this eclipse cycle. It's the waning phase before we move into the new moon in Virgo. And with Venus kind of hovering within, since we had the eclipse at 28 degrees of Leo, Venus is like hovering around this area. And it's like, all right, what else do we want to work on that came up around the eclipse, season in August? And because it is the North Node, it's like what's growing, what's new that's coming in, what is it that we want to express? How can we connect with ourselves in a way that is authentic and creative and self-expressive, which are all Leo traits. I think the other piece of this that's really interesting is that Venus is activating the cycle of Jupiter and Uranus, which, we'll talk about the Jupiter and Uranus opposition in future episodes because it's not exact just yet. But that's a very revolutionary kind of energy. And it also, to me, it is a really nice pairing with the Venus and Leo and how it is so, it's a new opening for something dramatically new, which that could be for better or worse. But I'm curious, what do you think about that piece, Mel? How does that feel to you?
Well, I think it's so important. Yes, because keep in mind, we haven't really discussed it yet, but yes, Jupiter is, saddling up to an opposition with Uranus. And these are slow moving planets. So these are big themes in our lives. And how that, I love how the North Node is really playing into this. And like you said, Shawna, it's adding this, it's kind of adding this new dimension to all the things we've gone through, because this is the last personal planet that's going to hit this eclipse point, right? We've made it through, Mars has hit it, Mercury has retrograded over it, and so there's a softening here, with all these issues that we've, been dealing with recently, so basically we're going to have Venus trine Saturn. Venus is going to sextile Jupiter. Venus is going to trine Uranus at 27 degrees. And then it's going to separate and hit the eclipse point. And I just think this whole week is leading up to this, this new awareness around all this North Node action that we've been taking on, all the growth that we've been having in our lives, and kind of adding that last little piece of the puzzle and that last, appreciating, what it is that we've gone through and all the new insights that we've, taken in the people that have, enriched our lives, for better or worse, so I think it's so poignant, especially just where it is in the zodiac with, this eclipse point. It's really allowing us to kind of open up to all the stuff that we've been processing, lately and be able to do that with a more flowing, just a flowing rhythm about us rather than a lot of these hard transits that we have been going through. But we're not necessarily, it's interesting when we're talking about this all, Shawna, because we're about to go into a next, aspect, which is the sun squaring Saturn. So we have all these things going on, but then we are about to paint a slight hump in the, an obstacle in the road. So it's hard to say.
Yeah.
What exactly to expect. All right, Shawna, should we talk about some of these tarot cards?
Yes.
Yes, and they're interesting to say the least. And we actually have more than two because I had drawn the focus and the grounding when I got the Devil and Death. And, don't be scared of these cards, but I have to say, I needed more than just the Devil and Death. So we have two supporting cards as well, which are the Star and the Two of Cups. So let's put all this together. So basically, we have two influences here, and they're really talking about relationships, and staying focused on our own hope and faith within relationships with that Star and the Two of Cups. But right now we have to free ourselves from essentially some negative influences in our lives, or certain things that just need to be broken down in order for us to really transition into this new place that we're all trying to be in, whether it's in our, our jobs, our relationships, what have you. We're all transitioning, but in order to do that, we basically have to make some choices, to free ourselves from that devil's influence. So Shawna, how do you see this 4-card combination kind of coming into play?
Yeah, so this is an intense combo. The Devil card and the Death card, they typically invoke a little bit of fear because they're about change. And the Devil card, to me, is a reminder that it's healthy to look at what it is that we are tied to, what we're bound to, especially within the material world, something that maybe is tying us down and holding us back. The thing with the Devil card, though, is that it's typically of our own doing. And so the benefit of that is that it's up to us to change, that we actually have the power to transform. And this is really beautifully illustrated by having the Death card. And the Death is about allowing something to decompose, allowing something to fall away when it is ready to fall away. And what's cool, though, is, all of that sounds really intense. But then we have the Star, which is about, like you said, Mel, keeping hope and faith and looking towards the positive. And then the Two of Cups, which is about two people coming together. And it's about that Venusian connection that can happen. So to me, this is like, there's something that we need to look at that is actually not, that's actually not good for us, that we need to let go of. And then when we do that, we can live in a more, healthy, happy, and harmonious way.
Yes, it's because we have to get rid of that devil influence. What it is that's holding us back from these wonderful things, such as, transformation and our hope and our faith and going after that guiding star, and especially in relationships and being able to connect with others, which is what Venus represents. So there's a couple different ways this can play out, like depending on where you are in your Venus journey right now, if you're someone that needs to move on from a relationship, maybe it's time to tap into those idealistic driven notions about it, with that star, because sometimes there's idealism around the star. But then other times, if you're in a partnership that's going through changes, like this might be the time to basically let go of it, that, old, power struggles or just, those things that are basically holding you back and help to renew that relationship. And then if you don't have a relationship, and you say you're that homebody that needs to meet someone, essentially, that Venus and especially trining Uranus at the end of the week with our party, weekend with that Leo moon, this is the time to be that social butterfly and get out and like free yourself from your own chains of kind of being cooped up to be able to really connect with others and get yourself out there. So there's many different ways you can kind of paint this picture based on your own situation, I think. So yeah, Shawna, like, let's tie in that Uranus transit because I don't think we really got to talk about that too much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I love
that?
what you say about the weekend being kind of like the social butterfly party weekend situation, because we have Venus trining Uranus, which is really about, especially these are fire signs. Leo is fire, fixed fire, and then Aries is cardinal fire. And so whenever there's a fire situation, there's passion, there's ambition, there's wanting to put ourselves out there in the world. And then, like you said, Mel, the moon is in Leo with the North Node too. And so all of this to me is very much about trying something new and being loud and proud about it, because Uranus wants us to change things up. It wants us to break up the norm of our life. And so the thing is, you don't have to do that. You can very well go about your life and, stay at home and not connect with people or go through old patterns. But you really benefit. We all really benefit this week, especially this weekend, when we try something new, we go on a new adventure, and that's going to look different for everyone depending on your level of adventurousness. But for anyone, I mean, the more that you can get out of the rut this weekend, the more that you can be open to doing something new and maybe even something a little bit scary and emotionally vulnerable, that's really going to bring in some new, fresh energy. Like that's going to bring in the star energy. That's what I think about that.
Right. Basically, Uranus is asking us to, dispel the devil and allow for the star, break out of that, like free yourself from these chains or being limited here, and just go out there, have fun, give it a chance, let yourself loose, don't stay in all these, considerations of, what could possibly, because a lot of times people build things up so much in their minds, especially around interacting with other people, that then you get stuck in this devil situation, and you don't connect, and you essentially are in bondage to your own self. And you want to get out there, us people make the world a better place, when you get to, talk. How exciting is it to talk to a new person and see what their lives, are like and what they have to say and their insight, right, Shawna? Like, isn't it just, it's enlivening to connect with other people. So don't be afraid. Get out there. Is essentially what we're saying here. So let us talk about a few little questions, to take away with this, all this Venus action in that first quarter moon. The last quarter. Mercury's really getting me today, people. P.S. We are taping this as Mercury turns direct, so it is very, very strong. So some questions to take away, is I would ask myself, what steps can I take to dedicate more energy to my heart's desire? Do I need more receptivity to the pleasure principle? I would ask, with all the changes that I've endured over the last month, how can I find patience and increase stability within my partnerships and finances? And then lastly, I would ask, especially for this weekend, how can I break out of my cocoon to let this social butterfly free? So fly, young ones, fly. I'll be flying myself. Okay. So, with all that flying, let's come back down to Earth. And we're going to talk about Sun squaring Saturn. So we're going to have the Sun in Virgo squaring Saturn, in Sagittarius, and what we have titled Devotion to the Vision. And that's going to happen exactly on Tuesday, September 13th at 7:58 p.m. Pacific time. which is Thursday, 2:58 a.m. Universal Time and 12:58 p.m. Aussie Eastern Time. And that is going to happen. Sorry, that first one was exact on Wednesday for us Pacificers. So that's going to happen at 21 degrees Virgo and Sag. So Shawna, kick us in with your quote.
So this quote is from the I Ching, which is a divination system. If you don't know what it is, look it up. It's really interesting. It's like anything else that's used, like the tarot or like astrology, and it's something that Carl Jung was really interested in. So this is from a section called the Hexagram 60, and this is translated via the Wilhelm Baines version. It says, limitation has success. Unlimited possibilities are not suited to humankind. If they existed, his or her life would only dissolve in the boundless. To become strong, a person's life needs the limitations ordained by duty and voluntarily accepted. That car agrees with me.
I was about to say that car alarm is saying, hell yeah, Shawna, that's right.
Yeah, get it. So I like this quote because it is inherently Saturnian. Saturn is about limitation. And my pet peeve with Saturn is that it's typically equated to unpleasant limitation. Saturn is related to boundaries. It's related to the structure of our life. And the thing is that we actually need this limitation in order to create, in order to put something of beauty out into the world. Saturn lets us do that. And so with this particular transit, we have the sun, which is our life force, our energy. It's spiritual energy that we want to share with the world. And the sun is also kind of like a spotlight focus. It's what our heart is focused on in the moment. And when the sun squares Saturn, there's this certain element of needing to decide what it is that we want to focus on. So there may be a certain element of limitation, but with the sun, it's like, okay, what am I here to do? And I only have enough time and energy and spirit to dedicate. I only have a certain amount. And so what is it that I'm going to dedicate myself to? And so I really like this quote that it's, especially the limitations that are voluntarily accepted. That feels really sweet for this transit.
Yes. And I just, a little side note, I love the I Ching. Like it's, for any of you that have not used that as a divination tool, I highly recommend, giving it a go because it really does add another layer of insight with all the tools that we have out there. And it is ancient wisdom. Mm-hmm. So, I agree, Shawna, that it's time for us to get down to business, essentially. Cause that's when Saturn arrives. It's business is knocking on your door and it's like, all right, it's time for you to get serious about this. It's time to make some decisions. It's time to put those limits and those forms. And like you said, Shawna, when you have this great spirit and this great energy flowing within you, because keep in mind, we have a fire trine, going on between, Venus and the North Node. And then we got Uranus and Saturn. So there's all this spirit that's kicked up there. But, that Virgo moon that's challenging, that Virgo sun that is challenging, that Saturn is basically like, okay, so what's real here? How can we make this reality? How can we get down to the nitty gritty and what needs to be done? Like you can be spirited to the nines, but if you don't put that form around it and make it into this real world, then all that, inspiration, essentially is, can't come down to earth. And so I think that's what the Virgo sun is really asking, for us to do at this time. Because, I don't think there's any way that any of us are really going to get out of dealing with a temporary period of frustration or an obstacle that comes our way, or feeling unappreciated, around, what we've been trying to go for in our achievements, or feeling like you're on a fence and have to essentially make a decision. And so we are all at this this pivot point in a sense of kind of dealing with reality and what it is right now and making the decisions necessary to put form around what it is we're trying to do in order to get us past this temporary hump in a sense. So what do you think about that, Shawna? Like the fact that we're probably going to have some frustration here and some obstacle. It's kind of the Saturn's MO in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is Saturn does not allow for escapism. It's not like you can just be like, oh, I'm not going to deal with that and just forget about it. No, like that is not what this is about.
Wrong.
Yeah. Saturn's like, no, you got to deal with this, especially the fact that it's a square. Squares require our action. They require us to do something about a certain situation. And so, yeah, I think you're right. Like there is an unavoidable, there may be an unavoidable unpleasant feeling such as, responsibility or having to work at something or, feeling like, especially during this time, even when Saturn's involved, there can be a tendency to feel, guilty about something or to just feel like life is really, really heavy. And so I don't share that because that is what will happen, but that's a tendency if we're not meeting the responsibility from a place of willingness. And so that's why I think it's so important, especially because we're talking about the sun in Virgo, which is about dissecting and engaging and using discernment. And then Saturn in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is about the higher vision. And so, there's a call here to like change something, to like go in and be like, okay, what's going on here? And so if you don't do that, it's just going to like snowball when Saturn is around. Saturn doesn't let us get away with things. And so, yeah, I do think that there can be this, like having to confront situations. It's definitely a time of adulting, I think. Hardcore adulting is called for.
Hardcore adulting, yes.
Yeah.
And the only reason we say this is basically to keep you on alert here, not in a way that, oh my God, my life's going to fall apart. It's more that just being aware when you're feeling a little down and things just aren't going your way, or you have to make those tough decisions, or you're frustrated by something. Just knowing that this energy is out there, so that you don't make the wrong decisions. You don't go overboard. You don't, throw it all away, the baby with the bathwater, cause Saturn really asks us to stay, steady with something, steady accomplishment. It's essentially the way to go right now, and taking our time with something and learning, that our big vision might take some patience and working out all those details, and getting to work on all the minutia, which not everybody loves working on minutia, like, ask a Sagittarius out there or an Aries. They're like, what are you talking? God, no.
They're like, what is that?
So what is that? What is that? Don't I just do and go? Doesn't that just work? So these are the types of challenges, that we can be having now. And I heard, some moons ago about how Saturn basically, Saturn represents our reality, but it also represents how we view reality. So that's the thing to keep in mind here, is that it doesn't mean that the world really is all on your shoulders, or the world's out to get you. It's really taps in, especially with that Saturn and Sagittarius, our own belief around reality and what it is that, we encounter and these frustrations that come our way, and how maybe we can look at that and expand our awareness around actually seeing Saturn for what it is, because, Saturn represents reality, but essentially that's still within our own perception. And this is where this, Sagittarius energy basically comes in. So what do you think about that, Shawna? About the kind of, what is it? Liz Green's book, old look at a new look at an old devil. Like how can we look at this Saturn, a little differently for that,
Yeah. I think you're right, because the reality is that the material world is not all that there is. And Saturn, it does point to the places where we feel responsible for things, when we take on responsibility, and maybe we don't have to. I mean,
it's like, oh, but sometimes we do. It's like but it's about discerning it, right? You know?
Yeah. It's about like, what is it that you are devoting yourself to? And, I have kind of mixed feelings about that take, because in one way, when we have a certain responsibility and when Saturn is around, there are things that will happen like, health issues or financial issues or, even like housing. If someone is having a Saturn transit through the 4th house, or family stuff. Some of those things, they do confront us with the physical reality, with our mortality. But then at the same time, it's like when we go through some of those things, it also reminds us of our spiritual strength. And it reminds us that there's nothing in the material world that can, that things can be taken away in the material world, but that nothing can take away our spiritual strength. And so I think it's kind of like a paradox, because it is these things like health issues and life and death, they're so important and they are unavoidable, but they're not the entire story. And so it's kind of like for me, it's kind of like a mind warp to like think about that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, but you're absolutely right about that. And that's, essentially what I was pretty much saying. And it is that trick of reality, in a sense. And sometimes you have to own up to it. Like Shawna's saying, we have to take responsibility for certain things. But then, if you live too much on this earthly realm, it's time to, lighten your load a little bit and, kind of rethink that Saturn function. So, you just have to look at it within yourself and kind of, discern what that means for you. Cause some people are more Saturnian than others. Like, I'm definitely a Saturn person. I got a Capricorn moon. I got, Saturn in Virgo, square my Mars, and sometimes I have to pull away from that. I have to realize that I'm making my life harder than it needs to be based on my own Saturn issues. So these are the types of questions that might come up for you right now. But, let's just keep in mind that we have all this Venus action going on. We also have Mercury conjuncting Mars in Virgo, which we're about to talk about in our next segment. And I think that pairing is really helping us get down to business. So although we might have to make some tough decisions, discern what's going on with our reality and just bite the bullet in certain areas and stay patient. We have so much energy that is allowing us to work and really get down to business. So we might just be challenging with our own self to get down to business in a sense. And that could be a little bit hard when the moon's moving through Cancer while we're having this, sun square Saturn. So just know that, emotionally, we might be a little sensitive, a little vulnerable. And so don't let the world take you down. And just remember emotionally that we're kind of developing this emotional strength to kind of deal with these, any type of frustration that might come up. So Shawna, what do you think about the moon being in Cancer, during this Saturn action?
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. I mean, the moon in Cancer, it's concerned with security. It's concerned with, what the feelings are of the moment. And so I don't know. I think that could help us really connect with what it is that's important to us. I would watch out though for looking at things from a more subjective view, and, moon in Cancer or Cancer energy in general, it can go into a more victim, based mode. And so that's something that I would watch out for. Like, is whatever that we're going through, is it kind of like you were saying earlier, Mel, like, is it really this bad, or is this really the truth of the situation? And so I think that the more that we can be emotionally aware and take things from a more objective view, that is going to benefit us, so that we can connect emotionally, but still keep the bigger picture in mind.
Yes, I think that's excellent advice, Shawna. It's all that. It's very, very true. Just stay away from that that kind of helplessness that can sometimes happen within Cancer. And don't let the weight of the world get you down. Just tap into what that reality is saying, and go from there. And I think the tarot cards are actually very interesting for this transit. And I drew the 10 of Pentacles as the focus and the 10 of Wands as the grounding. And I have to say that this really ties in with what you were just talking about, Shawna, and that need to basically have like this physical and material turnaround in order to have this spiritual and passion oriented turnaround, you know? So basically we have to change something in our physical reality, in order to, change something within what it is our goals are going for. Like say, you know, a lot of times the 10 of Wands is associated with overburden and too much responsibility. So this could be the time where we need to call upon other people and the support of our network of our, you know, of people in the world that has helped to support us to get some of that weight off our shoulders, to help us, you know, reach our goals and to look at it, what it is we are going for. So how do you see these two cards kind of playing in for this Sun square Saturn?
Yeah, so I think you're right. It really does speak to that connection of that we need to have our physical world, our physical ducks in a row, in order to have that spiritual connection at the same time, that both are important. And then also, yeah, I like how this kind of, it can tie back to the Venus piece that we were talking about earlier, where it's like, okay, are you taking on too much or are you shirking responsibility? These cards to me speak more of a tendency of taking on too much. And, you know, like being like, I'm going to do everything. And then you're like, holy fuck, this is a lot. I don't know if I can do all this. And so, you know, not to say don't take on more things, but I like what you said, Mel, just now about, you know, asking for help and how is it that we can collaborate or work with others, because that ties in the Venus piece that we were talking about and doing things in a different way. And so I think it's a great time to look at what it is that is on our plates this week and the whole next month even. And, you know, how are we going to get that done? Is it too much? Is it not enough? What's a more creative way of doing what we have to do? And then also, making it workable, making it doable.
Yeah. Because, you know, the 10s are essentially a pause point, you know, they're not necessarily completion. If anything, a completion kind of comes around the 9. And we're able to then complete and kind of like go within to assess that. And then the 10s are basically this transition point to where we're going to start the cycle over again. So just know that this could be, as we're talking about with Saturn, this is a time of transition, of pause, of waiting for a second, slowing down, you know, assessing what the heck is going on here. And, you know, especially with that 10 of Pentacles, a lot of times it might feel like we have everything, or it might look like we have everything in the material world, but we're missing something. And so that can be another added, layer to this puzzle of where we're trying to basically connect with what it is that's still missing in our lives. And that we might be overlooking, just by overworking and trying to, going too hard towards our goals, you know. Is there something missing in our daily reality based on all this pushing that we've been doing? Because a lot of times, you know, with the 10 of Wands, the guy's pushing with the wands ahead of him and he can't see. His head's all down. He's like, he's just pushing forward. He's like, oh my God, it's so much, you know, like Atlas holding that, or Sisyphus, you know, pushing the rock essentially. So yeah, we just basically need to tap into this transitionary, energy and how we can, you know, burden ourselves a little bit less, call in that support. And just know that we are transitioning essentially. So yeah. All right. We're all going to make it through. So no, don't even worry about that. You know, and if you need a little reference point, just know that the conjunction of Saturn and the Sun happened on December 12th of last year at 21 degrees Sagittarius, which Saturn is right now. You know, does this thing ever move? So a year later, we're back in the same place. So
that is interesting.
It is
the conjunction, and then the last square is at the same degree. Wow.
Yeah. So what does that tell you about retrogrades? You know, it puts a certain type of specificity on blast in a sense, you know. So 21 degrees, anyone 21 degrees Sag, why is my brain blanking? Sag, Gemini, Virgo, and Pisces, you know, you're going to, you folks are going to be, especially affected by, what this transit. So just keep in mind. Yeah. So that being said, let's segue into some questions here to take away. You know, I would, ask myself, I would say, how can I take limitations and delays with a grain of salt? Can I discipline myself to stay focused on future accomplishment? I would ask, how can I remain patient enough to maturely tackle obstacles when all signs point to a tough decision or a rough decision that needs to be made? And then lastly, I would ask, regardless of the frustrations before me, how can I remain devoted to the vision? How can I stay realistic and not pessimistic?
Ooh, I like that last one.
Yeah. So let's stay realistic and not pessimistic here. And, just a little, throw in there. If any of you want to know what, this means for your sun and your rising signs, I do have all my videos up on YouTube where I talk about the sun squaring Saturn, what that means for the signs. So if you want to dive a little deeper, you can check those out. So yeah, let's move on, Shawna, to last, but, certainly not least, we have Mercury, who's going to conjunct Mars for the second time, but this time in Virgo. And what we are titling Critical Awareness Like a Boss. And that is going to happen exactly on Saturday, September 16th at 12:01 p.m. Pacific time, which is 7:01 p.m. Universal time, and Sunday, September 17th, 5:01 a.m. Aussie Eastern time. And they'll be making their conjunction at 7 degrees Virgo. So Shawna, kick us in with your quote for this, this second conjunction.
Yeah. So this quote is by one of my favorite authors. Her name is Anodea Judith. She wrote The Wheels of Life, the classic guide to the chakra system, which is the most amazing book on the chakras, if that's something that you're interested in. So this is a section where she's talking about, sight and vision and perception related to the third eye chakra. She says, we also must remember that it is not matter that we perceive, but light. When we look at the world around us, we think that we see objects, but what we are really seeing is the light reflected by these objects. We see what they are not. We see the spaces between them, the spaces around them, but we cannot see into the actual objects. The more clarity we have within ourselves, the better we're able to see the subtle properties of the world around us. And so I like this because we have Mercury, which is now, it's out of its retrograde period. It's moving forward. It's in the sign of Virgo, which it's really strong in, which is all about critical awareness. It's about, even more so than any time, because we're coming out of a period of review during the retrograde where we're in Virgo, and it's like, okay, how can I make sense of things? How can I perceive what's real and what's not? And then Mars is about this action. It's like, I want to know, I want to be able to see better. And so, this combination to me, because it's, the second time and because it's in the sign of Virgo, this is where we are able to see more clearly. And, even though Virgo is an earth sign, to me, it is a more spiritualized sign because there's this element of healing through the material world. So it's almost like healing through seeing. And so I'm really excited about this transit.
Shawna, I love that quote, not only for this transit, but I feel like that really ties in the sun square Saturn and what we were just talking about, how we see essentially see the reflection of things and not for what they are.
Oh, you're so right. Oh my gosh. I didn't even think
we were just talking about this, and I just had chills when I said that. And essentially that can be tied into that kind of Saturn function as well, as far as what reality looks like and what we are actually seeing. And, you know, that might be an existential thing that, like, my mind is just blowing right now. But, essentially, it's a fabulous thing to think about, when we really focus on what reality and physical world and this, and earth, you know, earthiness. 'Cause here we have Mercury conjunct Mars in Virgo, like Shawna was just saying, this earth sign, and what is of this world, but what are we seeing? So I love this aspect because just like you said, Shawna, we've had this Mercury go through the ringer in a sense. It's backed up, hit eclipse points. It's conjuncted Mars already when it was in a sensitive spot, you know, and, you know, basically we've had the prior week, we were dealing with all this Neptune issue and these Neptune, you know, what fogginess and what's going on in my life. And, and then the full moon in Pisces, you know, there just hasn't been that clarity there that we all have basically been yearning for. And so I think it's kind of perfect with all these Venus transits, the sun squaring Saturn, getting us down to business. The fact that Mercury is in its dignity and exaltation, conjunct Mars in Virgo, we're focused. We're clear. We're ready to take action. And this is kind of everything right now, right? You know, like within everything that we've been dealing with, it's almost like the second conjunction, is really what is going to kickstart us, into, this next, you know, basically what, like not, basically year-long cycle as Mercury now has made its conjunction to Mars and, you know, going forward there. And just a little reference, you know, for when it did meet retrograde, at the eclipse point, that was on Sunday, September 3rd. So here we are, you know, a couple weeks later, getting a clearer rendition of what it was we might have been dealing with there, or how to get, you know, getting down to the nitty gritty of, you know, that Virgo energy. So we also have the moon in Leo. So here we are, a party weekend, and we're popped up and ready to go. So Shawna, how do you think that plays in? So basically we got the moon in Leo, but we also have that sneaky little Neptune that is opposing from Pisces. So how do you kind of feel that comes into play with this focus and clarity that we have, that Neptune action?
Yeah. So this weekend might be kind of like a, it feels like there's a surprise element. Like we know what we want to do, but then maybe something else comes in like a zinger and we're like, wait, what? What's happening? 'Cause yeah, the Neptune, it does diffuse things a little bit. And so, you know, it is opposite. It's not, you know, terribly close, but it's close enough to where it will have an influence. And so I think it could go one of two ways. Neptune can confuse things. It can bring a sense of illusion or being disoriented. But at the same time, I don't know, like that might actually be a really nice counterbalance to Mercury and Mars, because Mercury and Mars, especially in Virgo, like that could be a little nitpicky. It could be a little critical. It could be like, hey, I'm going to tell you the stuff about you that I don't like, and I don't care if I hurt your feelings. Like, it could be kind of like that. And then, of course,
Neptune's
the moon in Leo.
Where's the compassion?
Yeah, so Neptune might bring in a little bit of compassion. So I think it really depends on a person's temperament and how they. I think that like all of this stuff, it's really about our ability to communicate, how it is that we communicate actively, how it is that we say what we need to say. And so, you know, it could go either way. Someone that is more of a wallflower, they may have more of the gumption to like speak out when they need to. And then if someone is always the one that's speaking out, it may be like more of a verbal diarrhea situation. I don't know. So it could go either way. What do you think, Mel?
Well, yeah, especially with that moon in Leo, we're going to be kind of ramped up to share and just be like, be ourselves more than normally, especially emotionally. And I think you're right about that, Shawna, especially with that, Mars and Mercury in Virgo. Yeah, this could lead to certain conversations, where you can really, drill down into what it is you need to say to someone and be, very, precise with how it is you view this person or what it is you want to say. And so, let's hope that Neptune function is basically, allowing us to meet in the middle with some compassion for another person. And then also, hey, what if, we have been working on all these like long-term visions over the last couple weeks. And so possibly, last week when we had all that Neptune energy, maybe we were tapping into what it is that our dreams are telling us and, that back to that idealistic vision. And maybe this Mercury and Mars and Virgo, opposing that is like, okay, so how can we get realistic about this dream? How can we communicate with the right people? How can we take the right actions? How can we take this new clarity that we have around something that was essentially a little nebulous in our mind and really go forward with the assertiveness that is needed? So there's all these layers that could essentially happen during this conjunction and opposition to Neptune. But like Shawna and I always say, it depends on your chart, what it's hitting and what other planets, what houses, etc. So take all these things and see how they might work for you. So yeah, and I think the tarot cards really kind of tie in nicely here. And tie in nicely, but also with that same double-edged sword. And pun intended, I suppose. And so here we have the Six of Wands as the focus, and then the Sun or Knight of Swords as the grounding. There's a couple ways that this could go. This could be really us finally, successfully navigating a challenge, especially in a Sun square Saturn week. Things might be on the table that are challenging. And so, we might have successfully navigated this, or we might have, be able to successfully communicate, what it is that we are fighting for in a sense, and the necessary battles that might need to be fought with others or within partnerships, kind of sharing your peace, especially this Venus week. And I don't mean go out there and slay. I mean, sometimes you have certain things you have to say and get off your chest, in order to feel more comfortable within yourself. So Shawna, how do you see these two cards kind of playing into space? Well, that works too.
Yeah. So these are interesting. The first card, the Six of Wands, that to me is really interesting because it does speak of victory, recognition, and self-confidence. And this to me is a healthy manifestation of the moon being in Leo during this time, of Mercury and Mars being together in Virgo that are like, yes, like I'm doing the things. And then Neptune is also related to, in a certain weird way, getting attention for something, and recognition and people looking to you in a certain way that is, idolized even. And then the Knight of Swords is like, it is that like to me, that's totally Mercury Mars, like the being opinionated
right?
and saying, and sometimes maybe, acting, like the swords is communication and the knight is like, I'm going to go forward. I'm not really going to think about it, but like, I'm going to act on my gut and just do it. And so it's kind of I think that to me, it's most interesting that the Knight of Swords is the grounding.
Yes.
So I'm curious, like, what do you think? Cause I would think they would be flipped almost, but I'm curious, what do you think about that, Mel, that the Knight is the grounding card?
Well, and that might just really play into needing to say something to someone, like everything, the whole transit is grounded in your communication, and how well you do that. Cause here we have the flip side of things. Like, Shawna and I have discussed the, potentially awesome outcome comes. But the shadow side is that, you know, if you tend to be on a high horse of sorts, or, you know, or it can be a little pompous in certain areas, don't, you know, like, be aware of that. Like, this is the time when we can be victorious, around something and really gain recognition for what it is that we're trying to communicate and the things that we're trying to tackle, in our lives. But the flip side and that sword side is, you know, especially if you have something to communicate and maybe you are right. Maybe you are nailed it. But if you are going to not be a good sport about it and, be like, I told you so. And this is what that, you get that, you know, that is what is going to get you in trouble. And that's when we have that Virgo energy come in, you know, and kind of pick that whole apart. So basically what I think these cards are saying to us is, yes, we have to communicate something. We have to actively start getting this groundwork and tackle certain challenges in our lives in order to move forward to that victorious stance that we're looking for, to that recognition and that accomplishment and that acknowledgement from other people. But in order to do so, we have to get that verbal communication in place in order to reach those victories. But with the swords, it's always like, are you doing it the right way or the wrong way? And these are the questions that come up right now, I think.
Yeah, I didn't make that connection. I like what you said, how, you know, if you're up on your high horse, both of these cards, the person is literally up on a high horse. And so that is, yeah, that's a danger. That's a shadow.
So high.
Yeah.
Yeah. So don't look down on others, you know, like that's essentially what happens, you know. So, it can go one of two ways. So just keep that in mind, you know, be a good sport, especially if you find yourself on the upper hand of things. But like Shawna and I were talking about earlier, a lot of this could just happen to be like with your own person and, you know, confidently and victoriously going after what it is you want and communicating with the right people, and your own planning strategies, you know, cause it's not just communicating and talking, you know, getting that mind organized and going after these ideas that we have, because the knight is essentially got these great ideas and it's ready to go forward there. So there's so many layers that this can take at one time, and you might even encounter them with the different layers, you know, together. So just keep that in mind, you know, err on the side of being a good sport, and really just, communicate what you need to and put those ideas into action in order, to have a little, victory in life. So let's, some takeaway questions for this Mercury, conjunct Mars. I would ask myself, how can I take action on all the details in my life? How can I use my critical awareness like a boss? I would ask, now that my mind is more driven than ever, what does my solid long-term plan for growth look like? Do I need to make one? And then lastly, I would ask, is there something on my mind that needs to be relayed to another? How can I find victory within my own ability to communicate?
I love that.
So, yeah. So Victory. How can we find, I know, Mercury! Oh, man. Especially since we're taping this as it's, turning direct right now. I can't wait to get to this moment. That being said, Shawna, what have we learned? Oh my God. What haven't we learned? So much. You know, well, we've learned essentially that Venus is coming around the corner and is going to trine Saturn, sextile Jupiter, and trine Uranus, all while we're having a last quarter moon. So relationships, finances, and our social lives are kicked up, and we might have a little uncomfortness in our emotional selves that we have to work through, but that's okay. We've learned that Sun in Virgo is going to square Saturn, and we have to stay devoted to the vision, even though some obstacles might come our way. And then lastly, we've learned that Mercury, conjuncting Mars in Virgo, is going to kick up our critical awareness like a boss, and it's time to get down to business and focus on the details. So Shawna, I know you have an excellent action item for everyone to take away this week. Please share.
Yeah, so this week, two-part action item. So part one is to write a list of all of the things that are on your plate for, the next week. Let's do the next week. Keep it concise. So this can be just brain dump. All of the things that you have to do, all the things that you're working on, the stuff that's on your mind. This can be day-to-day stuff. It can be projects, whatever it is. And so the idea is to get all of this stuff that's floating around in your brain onto one piece of paper. Or maybe use multiple pages, but it's in one place, basically. And then, put that somewhere where it feels good, where you can reference it and look back on it when you need to. But I want you to kind of set that aside to have somewhere throughout the week. And then every day I want you to have on a little note card or another little piece of paper, write down the 3 things that are most important for that day. And I like this because it really channels the Mercury and Mars energy that we were talking about, and all of the Sun and Virgo. Virgo loves to have things in lists. It loves to work things out through a process. And so the fact that you can get all of this stuff that you need to do, which is about Mars, onto one place, one location, and then to kind of section it out day by day. Okay, what do I actually need to do today? What is the most important things? And I say important, not urgent, because urgent isn't always the most important stuff. Sometimes someone comes to you and they're like, oh my gosh, I need you to do this. But is it really important to you, or is it urgent to them? And are they putting their urgency onto you? So that's what I would do.
Solid Virgo questions.
Yeah, right? So those are your action items: to do a brain dump, all the stuff you got to do, and then every day do just a little tiny short list, 3 things that are priority for that day.
I love it, Shawna.
Yeah. And then, of course, if you want to get involved even more, like we mentioned earlier in the episode, we're really excited to share these show notes with you. So you can find those on our Instagram and our Facebook, the Feminine Principle Podcast. And that will be complimentary for this first week. So you can just download that. You don't have to do anything special or fancy.
Just check it out.
Yeah, just check it out. And yeah, so that's that.
Yes, so we will have that. So we're very looking forward to getting that out there and then showing a centralized presence for everybody to communicate with us. Cause we love your feedback, and everything that you've shared with us in these prior weeks. It's very, very much appreciated. So where can you find us, besides at Feminine Principle Podcast? Well, you can find me, at energeticprinciples.com. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Energetic Principles. And then once again on YouTube as Energetic Principles, which, as I mentioned earlier, my September horoscopes are now up. So you can see what these things that we're talking about and how they relate to you. So Shawna, where can they find you?
So you can find me all the places at Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. If you through Neo Feminine Astrology, through each of those.
Yes, and we always have fun new things to look at and daily just stuff,
all the things.
stuff, and more stuff. So yes. So any last words, Shawna, for our listeners?
Yeah, I'm sending lots of love and hoping that everyone has a wonderful week through all of these interesting transits. And then, of course, if you enjoy this podcast, definitely leave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes, because that helps us to be more searchable and to reach even more people. And also make sure that you subscribe so that you get these episodes the very moment that they are uploaded.
Yes. So help us spread the word. We want to get it out there. So yes. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. It's going to be a heck of a week, but we're looking forward to it, and we can't wait to talk next time. So until that next time, may the stars be with you.
Namaste.